Thank you for being here with us today. As you can tell by the crowd we have, I think there's a lot of interest on campus in this topic. So I will just jump right into some questions. So first of all, just as an introductory kind of question, as Provost of the University of West Virginia, the International Office reported to you, and the institution received the Senator Paul Simon Award for Internationalization, which is a very prestigious award. CSU also won it in 2013. So what are some of your personal and professional experiences in international engagement, and how does that inform how you think about it at CSU?
It's a great question, and when I think back to being provost, which was only 8 months ago, so I don't have to reach too far back, I realized when I first became the provost that as the dean of the law school, I had done a lot around international programs, and I had traveled with international programs, but I didn't understand the complexity of what our international office did. And that was one of the big surprises for me, is just how complex an operation is to try to do everything we want to do as a university to support international learning, to really support those people who come to us as international visitors, whether they're faculty members or students. And then on top of that, I didn't realize the layers of relationships that were necessary to support, for example, the Fulbright program, to establish relationships with all of the embassies from the countries where our students and faculty came from. And so that was the biggest, I think, thing for me, was just understanding all those layers of what we were doing. And then understanding the kind of richness that brought to our university, and then brought for our faculty and students who were able to take advantage of study abroad and Fulbrights and teaching and traveling. So those were things that were really wonderful for me. And then as I grew into the provost position, I actually got to take advantage of some of our relationships around the world, and that really sold me. I was hooked at that point.
Good. Glad to hear you're hooked. We're going to keep you that way. So I want to turn to the role of internationalization at a land-grant institution in particular. So as a land-grant institution, Colorado State was established initially to serve the needs of the people of Colorado. But today, CSU is serving the needs of the entire planet. So with our international partnerships, student learning, faculty research, how do you see the legacy of a land-grant mission combining with the globalization that's taken place today?
Well, I'm going to start with something that I discovered in October. I was invited to speak at the Asian Institute of Technology. And as a newcomer to CSU, I could not figure out why I was being invited to be the keynote speaker at the Asian Institute of Technology, and which is located in Thailand, right outside of Bangkok. And then I discovered, as I did more research, that actually one of our own professors, a water engineer, had emerged and grew his interest in both the Peace Corps and in NATO and SEATO being the Southeastern Asian Treaty Organization. And so through those connections, and this was in 1958, he went to Thailand and he established the Asian Institute of Technology. And their first 4 presidents were all CSU professors, all water engineers. And through SEATO and the Asian Institute of Technology, it turns out that we have educated thousands of engineers and scientists and veterinarians all over Asia. So when I went to Taipei, I met 40 of our alums. When I went to Bangkok, I met 30 of our alums. And what was really fascinating to me is that it was as if there was a legacy. So each person had known someone who had come to CSU. And then that person had said, oh, well, you need to go to CSU. But what was really interesting to me is we tend to think about our international relations now almost frozen in time, right? What are we doing now? What I realize is that since 1870, we've actually had an international presence, and particularly around issues that are so important like water and food, human rights, all of those issues, a lot of that has come out of CSU. And that makes me incredibly proud of what we've been able to do.
I want to turn for a minute to education abroad. So we've done research here at CSU with with the research office and with our education abroad office that has shown that study abroad participants graduate at higher rates than their peers who don't study abroad, especially Pell recipients, racially and ethnically diverse, and first-generation college students. So study abroad has a very positive impact on these students in terms of their retention and their graduation rates. So with this information in mind, what are your thoughts about how CSU can create even more access to these kinds of opportunities for all students, but especially students who may not have thought they could do this?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me comment on the fact that those students are more successful. Because I think one of the key attributes, and we may not talk about it enough, to students succeeding is curiosity. And those students who are curious and step up to go do these international programs are really the students who we want to say, yes, they're the ones who will actually go out and change the world, right? They're just going to accumulate more information, and they're going to understand humanity and other countries and cultures better. So I think it's really important that we offer these connections and opportunities for as many students as we possibly can. And I also think it's important for us to support our faculty in their curiosity and their exploration, because even for the students who for some reason can't go, can't travel, or believe they can't, which I think we'll talk about in a little bit, is the faculty members who then have experienced these opportunities around the world can share their curiosity and their enthusiasm and what they've learned. And these connections with the world, we really are, we are global, right? We really are. There are no boundaries unless we create them ourselves. And that's a huge political issue for us right now. What are the boundaries? How are they being created? But for us, I think ideally as an academic community, we can see the world as having no boundaries and trying to be the people who really believe that sharing knowledge and talent and people is something that makes our world thrive. And we can be advocates for that, for ourselves and for our students. And so thinking about how do we do that, right? We can raise more money to help students be able to afford international exploration, and our faculty as well, travel funds. We can work with foundations and agencies to try to help them understand the significance of it, the significance of the experience, but the sharing of knowledge, which is so critical. We can help our students understand better that sometimes the barriers they perceive to international travel actually really don't exist, and that there's a lot more available to them than they may know about. And so that's one of the things I think your office does so well, Kathleen, is really trying to break down those myths about what opportunities there are out there.
Mm-hmm. I want to turn now to international students and scholars. So I'd like to ask you a two-part question, but I'll pause and give you a chance to answer the first one before I go into the second one. So first, in your view, pretty simple, how does bringing international students and scholars benefit the CSU campus?
It's, I think the presence of our international faculty, our international students, and any international staff we have actually has a profound impact on campus. The presence of people who bring to us different ways of seeing things is very, very important to us as an academic community. I think it fosters an understanding that in the end, we're all human beings and we have many of the same passions and fears and anxieties, no matter what the culture is. And understanding that very profound human connection, I think, is so very important to us, and to our values. I also think that the presence of an international community within an academic community is another way that our students and staff and faculty who don't travel as much actually are enriched by all these people who come here and help us really understand the world. So it's, when I have meetings with international students, international faculty or staff, I feel like they're a gift. This is a gift to our community. And in fact, it's a gift that makes it easy on us, right? They've come to us. And so the more that we can embrace them, be hospitable, make them feel like help them feel that they are part of this amazing group of people who are exploring the world and knowledge and developing knowledge together. That's just something that fills me up every day. It just makes me so happy to walk around campus and see the diversity we have.
Well, that's a good segue into the second part of my question about international students. So how then do we include international students in our bias and equity initiatives at CSU? We know that there are some international students that feel marginalized or threatened, maybe feel unsafe because of the color of their skin or the language they speak, the sound of their voice, the color of their passport. For example, with the coronavirus right now, we have had some members of our international community express concern that people are discriminating against anyone they even assume might be Chinese, as if just being Chinese means you're going to be a carrier of the virus. So there's a lot of ignorance out there too. So how can we build more proactive forms of support for our international students?
Well, it's on each of us. I sent out an email when the coronavirus was really first starting to hit the press, and Wuhan was on lockdown, and I made sure to mention that our international students from areas where COVID-19 had a presence, that these were people who were part of our community, and they have left loved ones behind who they may be very anxious about. And I asked people to really be extra kind to them, to make sure to understand that they may be afraid for their families and friends who they've left behind. And I did that just because I felt so sad for what it means to be away from the people you love when you're worried about them and not be able to go back and forth. But I can do that, and I can reach a certain number of people, only those people who will read my emails, which are not always a lot. But each of us can do something. Each of us can own that responsibility as a human being for reaching out to people, trying to help other people understand who they are, what their fears may be, how we can better support them. I raised the issue of international students and faculty and staff and discrimination against them in the Race Bias Equity Initiative because I know that when people are different, other people may exclude them because of a lack of understanding. And so the work that you're doing actually to bring international programs, international difference to the attention of this community, and then having these forthright conversations, I think is very, very important. I do believe in the strength of this community, and I do believe that almost all of us have open hearts and open minds. But there will be some people out of fear and out of prejudice who will not treat others well. And part of what's on us is to make sure that if we see that or witness it, know that it happens in a classroom or a residence hall or in the Laurie Student Center, that we actually are people who will step up and say something about it, help other people understand how hurtful and painful, and how it doesn't reflect who we are as a community. And if we in this room all commit ourselves to that, and then get the other people around us to commit themselves to that, we can be that stone in the pond that ripples out. And I believe that that is very, very, very important. So I think you and international programs are playing a very, very important role in helping us understand difference and overcome bias.
As a follow-on to that, what do you see as the best sort of overlap and joint initiatives that could happen between the Office of the Vice President for Diversity and the Office of International Programs? Some people see that as two totally different spheres, but I believe there's overlap.
Yes, absolutely. I think there's great overlap. I think that it may be that if we don't have a specific identity center for a certain nationality, that students may feel like they don't have a place to connect. And I've given that a lot of thought about how do we build access for everyone to feel like they can go to a place and have their needs and fears and anxieties addressed. And so I think this is a perfect opportunity actually for the Race Bias Equity Initiative, the Office of Student Affairs and International Programs to join together and say, let's take a deep dive at what the needs of our international visitors on campus are, our guests, our members of our community. What are those needs and how can we better meet them? And I think that's an all-in effort.
Let me turn for a minute to the topic of research. Obviously, we're a Research One institution, and it's very important here. But the news is reminding us that international engagement is complicated, and certain faculty and research collaborations are receiving additional scrutiny these days. Recent cases at Harvard, Yale, and other places have been in the news. So how do we strike the right balance of promoting international collaboration with our faculty while being mindful of the concerns that exist, especially with China, which is what we hear about most?
It's a really difficult situation to navigate right now as a leader of a Research One university. The thing that gives me hope over the long term is that collaborative international research becomes more and more important in a globalized world and in a globalized economy. And where we can see right now that COVID-19 is causing a market stress, let's say, then we know that as the people who create that have knowledge, that create innovation, that it is more important than ever to be able to do this research across boundaries. And yet we're also at a moment in time where politically the federal government has decided that for whether good reasons or bad reasons, there are actual present threats by the exchange of knowledge. Being able to come together, I think, as a community, and maybe this would be a great symposium or topic to have for faculty who are doing international research, is just to talk about from the top, either through the Office of Research or for the President's Office, to really talk more directly about what we hear, what kind of communications we get, what we're being asked to do, or not do. That sharing of information, if it isn't happening, may be something that would be really worth us diving a little deeper into so that we can begin to understand better. Because I know certain researchers in certain areas are under more pressure than others. That's something that we really need to understand better. But I think that it's interesting that there are other countries other than China, and whether we should be worried about China or not is an open question. But there are certainly other countries where, if we're worried about China, we should be worried about those countries as well. And we don't have the same level of scrutiny on the intellectual work that's being done cross boundaries with those countries. And so a comparison of what it is that we believe those who are prohibiting us from doing work across boundary, what they believe, and applying that and comparing it to what's believed about other countries, I think would be a good opportunity for us. There's a way in which I think we ought to be preparing for perhaps more restrictions because of what happened at Harvard and Yale. Thank goodness we're a public land-grant university, research one that flies under the radar. We haven't been the subject as much attention as a Harvard or a Yale or a Stanford. That doesn't mean our work isn't significant. Our work is tremendously significant, but there's a way that those prestige schools become targets. And so far the publics have not been under the same level of scrutiny, which is good for us right now. I personally, as a president, and I think this is important for me to say to faculty, to students, to our staff, that I am always going to take the position that unless we can't, for some reason, we are going to try to be open about the work that we do and about how we reach across boundaries to do that work. Because as a just deep personal belief, I believe that the best work gets done through the open sharing of knowledge and collaboration. So I just want to, I have to use that value and test that value when I'm asked to, do things that we may feel is too restrictive, but I want you to know the place and values that I hold.
Thank you. In terms of on-campus internationalization, so as we've mentioned, we have significant numbers of international students and a fairly large number of students who choose to study abroad. But if you take those two together, it's still only about 15% of our student body.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we help all CSU students be exposed to international issues and experiences during their time at CSU, knowing that they're all not going to study abroad or all have an international roommate?
Well, one of the things I'd like to see is for those students who for some reason can't be gone a long time, right? That they have children or they have elder care responsibilities or they need to work and they can't take the time off work. I think we can do more to do sort of short trips. We've tended to have a model of study abroad that's longer periods of time. But it would be wonderful to be able to do shorter adventures. We have a campus in Mexico, Todos Santos. It's a very quick flight down there. It's a completely different country, different culture. That's something that we can encourage students and faculty to take advantage of. Even if that's the only experience, it's very, very rich. And something that's much more affordable, for example, than going to Asia or to Europe, but still gives a student and faculty and staff that amazing opportunity to experience new culture. Plus, it's on the beach. Just saying.
Just saying. That's right. That's right.
So I think that's one thing, is we just have to be more creative about how we think about our international study. I also think the kind of programming and international classes that we have are very, very important. One of the reasons I wanted to bring Ambassador Rice, who had been ambassador to the UN and then head of the National Security Council, one of the reasons I wanted to bring her here as a speaker was just to open that door for even students who are here who may not understand that whole world of international diplomacy, but to hear all of the work that she had done with all of the different countries. And I think those opportunities are very important. I think the exchange of food which is always, remember French class or Spanish class when you were in elementary school? You had to bring like a food from your nationality. My mother's side of the family is Greek, so we had to bring Greek food. Now that seems like such a small thing, but if you put people together around a table, sharing food that they love, being able to talk about the stories around that food, it's just a way of bringing people together. And who doesn't want to eat, right? So I think that it's a small thing, and in some ways we dismiss it as being silly, but it's one of those ways where you really break bread together and it can cross boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really important. I think sharing more about the research and teaching and work that we do is important. Like if I hadn't told you about the Asian Institute of Technology and being there, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't have this vision of rams running all over Thailand. But just sharing little bits of information like that about how in some ways we're everywhere, and then setting some goals through the strategic transformation process of saying, okay, we're at 15% now if we include those students. We want to be at 30% by 2025. What are the concrete 5 steps we can take that we can start to track the percentage more? Because if you can say we've got 30% of people on campus or people who are traveling, and that 30% then brings back all that knowledge and awareness, we're really starting to get to a saturation point. And that starts to make us feel, I think, more excited because it's more present.
Mm-hmm.
So you can set those goals.
All right, I will. I've got my mandate now. I'm
Okay.
ready.
I'll be curious when we do question and answer what people think about setting, a goal.
Yeah, I would be too. Let me turn to some long-term thinking. So as we have celebrated the sesquicentennial year, we look back on the remarkable legacy of 150 years of what CSU has been able to accomplish, especially in, as you said, water, agriculture, and other key areas. So how about if you dust off your crystal ball and look ahead and imagine 50 years in the future at CSU's 200th anniversary. What is the legacy that you hope we build now, and what would you hope to be remembered for in terms of CSU's engagement with the world?
Well, I'm very proud of this 150-year legacy that we have. To understand that in that 150 years, we have been transformative in critical parts of the world, that we have fed people, that we have done the research for crops that have prevented famine, that we have that we now have an international presence in sustainability, which is huge given what we're confronting with climate change. I know you saw we're #1 in the nation, and I always joke and say I'm not in the least bit competitive, but I'm very happy we bumped down Stanford to #2. It's just a small joy that I have. So we're #1 in the nation, but what we may not have really wrapped our heads around as much is we're #2 in the world in sustainability. #2. And that didn't just happen, right? That's the expression of 150 years of global engagement, and being able to bring our research here around efficient energy, around alternative energy, around water, around food, human rights, democracy. Those kinds of things, the fact that we can bring that to the world, I think what I'd like to see is just this tremendous escalation, not just in doing it, but in our awareness of doing it, and then the awareness of the world for what it is that CSU can contribute. It's just really, the legacy is remarkable. If we build on that legacy and set some firm goals of where we want to be in 50 years, we can reach them. One is how international our campus is, right? I think we want to be as international as we possibly can. So setting some strategic goals for that would make a difference. I think being really mindful about the research that we do and its global reach, and then being able to actually have more and more people engaged in that research is very, very important. I think having our students understand the essential nature of what it means to live in a global environment, and having a kind of fluency around internationalization is a goal that we should look to and say, did we accomplish it?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say what things would look like 50 years from now, but I would hope that we would get beyond the place where we are now with suspicion and closing borders, and that 50 years from now, if we were to be here, we would see a planet where people move freely, where people who are escaping war and poverty and violations of human rights and violence, that our doors are open, both as a country but also as a university. I would like to see that in 50 years. And that would, I hope I see it in less than 50 years.
Yeah.
But that would be a wonderful thing, to be able to come back 50 years from now and know that we had moved beyond this period of time. And I think we can contribute to that as a university. I think that one of the things we can do as academic communities is keep talking about why the exchange of people, the exchange of knowledge, the exchange of culture, of language, is so critical to who we are in terms of our humanity, but to our globe, and to the fact that we will have a livable planet in 50 years. And some of our most significant contributions in 50 years we can measure, and if we've been able to contribute to a sustainable planet, that will be a huge accomplishment. So maybe what I want to see most concretely 50 years from now is a crazy celebration.
That would be great. President McConnell, thank you so much for the questions that you've answered for me, but I would assume that we might have some audience members who would have questions as well. And Chad has a microphone that he'll bring to you so that we can all hear you.
Good morning, and thank you very much. I'm Magdalena Serpa. I work for the One Health Institute at CSU, and I want to thank both of you because we're starting conversations with international programs to develop some cooperation between my country, Colombia, in food security and probably veterinary medicine. So I'm very excited with that possibility. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. There were so many questions I had, and you started answering them. So Kathleen, great questions. President McConnell, great answers.
Yeah.
Something that's near and dear to my heart are the students that may be invisible immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
Our students who are third culture kids who grew up outside of their passport country, have now repatriated to come back. Our students who study abroad, who then come back and they're almost silenced, or there's this sense that study abroad, education abroad, being able to travel is a private benefit and not a public benefit. And you started talking a little bit about how important it is for our faculty who have traveled and done research to come back to the classroom. How do you think we can create an ethos on campus where people can share and not be embarrassed or looked down on, that they've had this experience and they actually have something to share?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and I can really relate to it because I worked all the way through school, and I had never flown on a plane, until I was older. And even though my parents had been stationed in Europe, we never traveled except in a car to see my grandparents. And so I know that when I was in college, I thought, I was envious, right? I thought, how do these people have that money? How can they take advantage of those things? And although I wanted to hear more, I hope I didn't silence them. I understand that impulse of feeling like maybe I can't take advantage of something that's as great. So I don't want people to be silenced at all, right? I do think that we're at a different place and a different time, and travel is less expensive than it used to be. It is more available, and I think we need to be more present on campus in our conversations about how we embrace it, how it's important, and that we try to make pathways to that experience more available. You know, so I love the example of Todos Santos because the flights are cheap. It only takes an hour and a half to get there. You know, and it's a completely different country, different language, different culture. You know, we should be promoting as much of that as we possibly can, and then helping students understand the funds that are available and the funds that they can use to have those experiences. And then for our faculty, if they talk about their travel, they'll really engage students. If faculty can write students into grants where they're doing international work and take a few of their students with them, that's huge, right? And then we have to work and try to see what we can do, raising private funds, seeing if there's foundation funds out there that we haven't identified yet. There's all kinds of work, but I think this kind of conversation is so helpful because we can say, okay, this is what we want to do, this is where we want to go, what are we already doing, what are the gaps, let's target those gaps, and then let's work on them. And that's why I love the idea of setting a percentage and saying how are we going to get to that percentage and tracking it. But I think it's such a good question. So maybe we have to have opportunities for students to tell their travel stories. That, you know, and maybe we could do that through TEDx kinds of talks, or we had, I think we have this here too, but the 3-minute dissertation competition. We could have a 3-minute student faculty travel competition that's really like a storytelling, you know, that could be fun. And so there are ways I think that we can start to build this kind of awareness and enthusiasm more. That's a great question.
Hello, hi, my name is Lauren Hartig. I'm a PhD student in OLPC, and my dissertation topic is first-generation students and short-term education abroad programs.
Yes.
And access to them.
Good.
So, an idea I've always had, and we talk about access, is the idea of a passport too, and we mentioned that and how important that is to actually go abroad.
Yeah.
And so an idea or a thought, and I don't even know if this is something that would be possible, is as you have gained entrance into universities such as CSU, what about having a passport or something programmatically that like allows you to pay for that passport or get that passport? I don't know if that exists or if that's something that's even possible within the university structure, but it's not always an idea I've had.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
We do have some specific fundraising that is done specifically for passports. So to allow students who don't have the money, it's called a passport campaign, to be able to do, to get their passport. But it's not something that we don't have enough money to make it available to everybody who needs it. And so something like you're talking about is a really great example. Another thing that could be done is that when a student is admitted to CSU, send their letter of admission and send a passport application with it to tell them this is what you can do when you go to CSU.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, that's great. Excellent. So one of the things that Jody's question triggered for me, and I thought this might be an opportunity for me to say something about it, so we also have a lot of people who feel invisible on this campus who don't feel free to talk about their DACA status or their undocumented status. Those are people who may experience themselves in this environment as being made invisible and not cherished and embraced by our community. Many of them are afraid to talk about being undocumented because they're fearful of themselves being arrested or their families being arrested. And so one of the things that I would ask all of you is help us with that. Help us to have these honest conversations about our undocumented students who are fearful, and figure out ways that we can make it better for them on this campus. We've made a commitment to them. We do everything we possibly can at a university level to support them. But part of this is really about more of an expression of they are essential members of our community and how can we help them better.
Just a minute, there's a question
Hi
back
there.
there.
Thank you for this talk, it's wonderful. And I wanted to piggyback on Jody's question, thank you for asking it, Jody, from a different angle, because the answer was about travel, which I think is fantastic, and it's wonderful that we're opening our minds to the globe from the scope of travel. At the same time, with Jody's question, I think with third culture kids, it's about culture and people who are seen to be one way in nationality, but they've grown up somewhere else or multiple places. And so when they come here, they're considered invisible immigrants. They don't feel like they fit in, and they can't talk about those experiences because oftentimes people go strictly to travel or to the fact that it may have been a privilege when they may have been a refugee, there may be immigrants, there may be many reasons those people have traveled. And the assumptions that are made around that make it even more shameful to talk about. So what can we do? I know Jody, and I really appreciate the work that Jody and Shauna are doing with Third Culture Kids. I know that you know about Cultures Magazine, which focuses on third culture kids and people who are in between spaces. So what else can we do to try to move that conversation forward and have people understand that there's more than meets the eye than just going different places. If you grow up in different cultures, that actually changes how you see the world and how you interact with the world. And people who grew up homogeneously don't understand that.
That's great. Jody, do you want to talk about that?
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, you do.
You know, I would actually say that Donnie is the expert on third culture kids. She's been doing significant work. Shauna and I have been supporting the student population here. Sorry.
So, you know, collaboratively trying to figure out how we can help the students who are perceived as international, but they're actually from the United States, but they haven't lived in the United States, or they have lived all over the world, but they hold a U.S. passport. And it's just, it's a confusing experience for our students in how people are interacting with them. And so trying to create that environment where they know they belong, and that their experience is valued. I think that's the hardest part is the silencing or the assumptions. So I don't know that I have much more than what Donnie's doing, because Donnie's doing a ton of work in this area.
Well, just, I remember a conversation I had with Donnie where she kind of blew my mind, right? Because she introduced me to a whole new concept. And her magazine is unbelievable in opening up these stories about these experiences. And one of the things that I do think we need to work harder on campus is having opportunities and places where people feel like they have the opportunity and an audience that will embrace them to tell those stories. The stories are incredibly rich about trying to navigate your identity through all of these different cultures and experiences. And so that's one thing we could think about when we're thinking about how do we internationalize campus, right? Is how do we take advantage of those experiences as opposed to making people feel like they can't talk about those experiences. And I think that this is a great opportunity actually for us to say one of our strategic goals is going to be really opening that up. And I don't know exactly what the answer would be, but I think making it a goal and explicitly saying it's a goal is something that actually will stop some of that silencing. Thank you, Donnie.
Bronwyn had a question.
Hi, I'm Bronwyn Watts from the Office of International Programs. I just had a quick comment about your undocumented DACA students. A number of universities actually have an UndocuAlly program, which is a little bit like Safe Zone training, and it provides a training for people that then allows them to have a sort of a certification that lets students know that it's a safe space to go to, and that could be something that would be really great for CSU.
That's great. What university would you say we look at for a model program?
I know Virginia Tech has one. I think California State has one. There's a number of other universities
Okay.
I can't think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, so another goal. I mean, these are really so incredible, right? If we say we want to do something and make that goal as part of what we're doing in strategic transformation, it can really make a difference. Sometimes just saying, calling these things out and saying, these are things that matter and that we want to do, and they're doable, right? That these are all great doable ideas.
There's one right behind you.
Hi Joyce, thanks again for all of your comments. One area that I know we're working on expanding is working with our international alumni. And I'm wondering, given your experiences with our international alumni, what you see as their added value and how we could continue to engage them in the future.
Oh, that's great. Well, I had dinner in both Taipei and Bangkok. Great food, by the way, with a large group of alums. And I think what they wanted was something more than just a dinner, right? I think they want to be engaged in a way where they can contribute back to campus. They're very powerful. Many of them are leaders in their countries, either in business or government, or in nonprofits, and they are great pipelines for us in sending more students to CSU. But I think they want to be engaged in a different way, in a deeper way. And so talking about that, and one of the things I think that happens in terms of our alumni relations is we tend to think of them as gatherings of people, and then we all have fun together, and then everybody leaves and goes their own way. But I think our deepest connections are actually through our academics and through those people who made a difference in other people's lives. And so rebuilding those relationships between mentors and students would be very, very powerful.
I think we have time for one or two more.
Hi, my name is Leah, and I just moved to the area, and I want to congratulate the university, all the signs I see about supporting undocumented students, and I think it is this one-on-one and breaking down fears, but I'm wondering what the institution is doing currently as an institution to really support those students.
Did you want me to answer that? Okay. So we're doing a lot, but there's more that we could do always. So our undocumented students meet on a regular basis. They have advisors, they have mentors, and they have people who help them navigate the complexity of what they have to deal with in terms of being here. We've made a commitment to undocumented students that we admit, that we will make sure that they are successful and that they graduate, and that we will provide financial resources. They do not qualify for other support because they're undocumented. So we have launched a huge effort to support our undocumented students as well as our DACA students. What is the most difficult for us is their fear. Really, literally, that is the hardest thing. It's easy, it's not easy, it's hard to come up with money, but it's a lot easier to come up with money than to find a way to reduce someone's fear. When there are raids in Greeley, for example, that is really hard on our students. They are very, very fearful for their families. Any kind of escalation in the national news about federal troops going into, or border patrol troops going into sanctuary cities. These are the things that it just sends chills, like just, and terror through the community of, what does it mean? And the visuals of what we saw and what we learned were happening at the border have really had a profound impact on this community. And we can do a lot better, I think, as a community in trying to help our students and supporting them. There's probably, one of the things we run into is because they are undocumented, they don't want to reveal themselves to be undocumented, so that there's a way in which they have to make themselves invisible in order to feel safer. And that's a real problem. So being able to talk publicly more, maybe about what we do for undocumented students without identifying who they are, may actually be something that would be better for the community as a whole, because it would raise them up without identifying who they are. So it's a great question. Thank you for asking it.
We have come to the end of the time, but we have wanted to give an opportunity for one last comment question here with the last moment we have left.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. In terms of international clients, I'm wondering how you plan to respond to international clients that have concerns about the morality of the research and business techniques that we use here at CSU.
Well, thank you for that question. I think that it doesn't just have to do with who our international visitors and guests are, but that we're always attentive to those kinds of issues and thinking about them, and always trying to do what we can do ethically. One of the great things about this university is the incredible and profound work that it does to try to help humanity. And there may be those people who disagree with that. What we want to always do is have an open forum for being able to talk about those disagreements and always trying the best path forward. We're very, very committed here to open dialogue and open discourse and learning from one another. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.